The Souls-like genre has attached itself to so many metroidvanias recently, it feels like it's almost redundant to say that a metroidvania has Souls-like elements. I think it's just a given at this point. And Nine Souls is no exception. A metroidvania that clearly took a lot of inspiration in its presentation and style from Hollow Knight, with combat that would make even the most diehard of Souls fans potentially say that it made them break a sweat. The game is super stylish and super difficult, but does that mean it's worth playing? Let's talk about it. Nine Souls is such an interesting game because I felt like I really didn't hear anything about it. It came out about halfway through 2024, and I really never heard anything about it until the end of the year when I saw it popping up on some people's top 10 games lists. I'm not really sure why or how that happened because from what I can tell and from playing the game, it is really, really good. The game takes place in this futuristic world where this sentient race of cat people have come. They've moved from their homeworld because of a disease that has endangered their entire race and are trying to rebuild, essentially. You learn this very sparsely and over the entire course of the game. The character you play as is one of 10 souls, essentially leaders of this new city. A betrayal happened, and so you are out for revenge to go kill the other 9 souls that are remaining. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple, but it does a great job at moving the plot forward. You just want to kill these people for revenge. I don't think you need much plot when it comes to these kinds of games. The story is the world as you explore it, as you unlock more stuff, the combat, fighting your way through, meeting new enemy types to fight and learn how to battle. That's the story to me. Sure, there's a narrative and that's nice to have, but it's not really something I go into these types of games really looking for. What is there is okay. There were some genuinely surprisingly mature moments in this game. I love when games do that, where they have age-friendly art style, and then they just hit you with super mature, potentially emotional, very graphic, violent stuff. The easy examples are like Rick and Morty. BoJack Horseman is another show that I think does that great, and Nine Souls does that as well, especially some of the boss battles. You really feel the hatred that your character has for these people. There is not much redemption going on here. This is just pure revenge, kind of John Wick style. Now, the most important thing in this type of a game is its combat, and I'm happy to say that the combat in Nine Souls is really, really fun and engaging. It's a very parry-focused system. You are encouraged to parry enemy attacks and then hit them with ki, which are these like bomb things that explode if you hold down the right bumper. On the whole, this works really, really well, and I really like their approach to adding forgiveness to the system without making it feel too easy. The actual parry window for most attacks is almost offensively tiny. It's very tight. You have to get very good at hitting these parries. But if you block a little early, rather than taking damage, you'll take what the game calls internal damage, essentially where there's still some red on your health bar. This is similar to like what Bloodborne has, where you can actually regenerate that health. So as long as you block, you get a wider window to block, and as long as you don't take an actual unblocked attack, you will get that health back. So that adds a little bit of forgiveness while still keeping the fights really, really tense. You don't have tight windows, and while that health is recovering, it does take a while to recover. So any further mistakes you make will be very punishing. I really like this system for the most part. There's a couple enemies, especially the final boss, where it almost started to feel a little unfair just because there's so many attacks and they're coming in such quick succession that you really have to be on top of it. But again, even the final boss, which is I think the most egregious example of it, it never got to that point where you're totally giving up and thinking, oh, this is totally unfair. I hate this. Why am I doing this? This isn't right. And when you finish the battles, you just feel so good about yourself. It's such a good, fulfilling feeling. And the combat, again, because of those tight windows, when you do start really hitting those parries, you get into this kind of flow state that just feels so good when you're just nailing every parry and killing all these enemies without losing any health. You feel really, really good. It's a really satisfying combat for the most part. There is one part of it later in the game. You unlock this sort of charged parry that you have to use against certain attacks. That one I never really got the hang of because you have to hold down the parry button to implement it. I felt like I could never get down the timing for how long it took me to charge that parry to then release it in time to parry the attacks. I really had trouble getting used to that. I still finished the game. I don't think it's terrible. I don't know, having it on the same button as the normal parry just threw me off a little bit. Caused my brain to kind of short circuit in some fights where you have to really be switching between the two. The other key part of Metroidvania games is, of course, the exploration, and this game has great exploration. It's really fun to explore the different areas of this city because it is this essentially world, home away from home type place. Each of the different areas serves a very unique purpose and therefore is able to have very unique looks and feels. There's the engine rooms, the research labs, the living quarters, the high society, and they all feel different. They all really have lives of their own. I do wish there was a little more as far as enemy variety. It felt like there really wasn't a ton of enemy variety throughout the game. You're essentially fighting the same kind of enemies, just as you get further in, they have more shiny armor, and so therefore do more damage and maybe attack you a little faster. But the game never really got old or stale for me either. I think the unlocks come at a really good pace, and they really drive you to explore the rest of the world. And the world is sort of spread out, and the path you take through it is pretty well handled in that it doesn't really feel like you're ever backtracking a ton to get to the new areas. You're always kind of just close enough to where you need to go next that nothing ever feels wasted. It never really feels like you're running around either not knowing where to go or like you have a long way to go to get back to a point where you will then be able to make new progress on the map. I think they really laid the map out extremely well in this game. Graphically, the game is very reminiscent of Hollow Knight, that same kind of cartoony art style. Very different worlds, very different vibes and feelings, but just at first view, they seem very similar at first glance. This is a game very heavily inspired by Chinese culture, so a lot of the music has that kind of theming to it. Fits the game perfectly when you're having these kind of drawn-out fights. It very much feels like you're playing an action movie. There's not a ton of side content in the game, but there is enough, and the characters that you meet are interesting enough that it's fun to go and explore the rest of the world to make sure you do unlock everything, get all of the different unlocks, complete all the various side quests. The mini bosses are also pretty fun. The bosses themselves, the 9 souls, are all very unique, very well designed. A lot of really cool fights that really do test your skills in unique ways compared to the average enemies that you've been fighting through the whole game. All in all, 9 Souls is a great game for both Metroidvania and Souls-like fans. They do have a story mode, so if you do find it too difficult, you just want to explore, you can turn that on and still play through the game. The exploration mechanics, the fluidity of the movement and exploration is so good. I think it's worth playing, even if you're not necessarily a fan of the more difficult combat that this game brings with it. Just its exploration mechanics are fantastic on their own. And then you have the combat system, which is extremely rewarding. Yes, it can be a little difficult at times with those tight parry windows, but there's so many mechanics around it. You're given a lot of additional support through some of the unlocks and skills that you can get, that it never feels unfair. It always feels rewarding to finish a battle, even ones that maybe take a good handful of tries. It always is rewarding when you're done. Very well designed battles, incredibly well designed boss battles. And overall, this game is really the full package. The story's fine, it's pretty intriguing, and as you get to learn more about the characters in this world, there is definitely some impact there. But what do you think? Is this game of the year? I'm not sure that for me personally it would have taken one of the 5 spots that I gave to the other games from 2024, but it was definitely a top game from 2024. It's just a question of how far down the list you want to put it. Was this your game of the year? Let me know in the comments down below. What other Metroidvania Souls-like games have you been playing? Leave a comment. If you liked the video, be sure to hit the like button. Let YouTube know you liked the video. Consider subscribing to the channel, and I will see you all with the next video.